Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. We all know what a Ouija board is, right? Aside from the general prohibition laid down on Christians to not have dealings with dead spirits, I've heard all sorts of stories of people who play with them and then have something in their house. Not sure if it's all true, but my gut says don't mess around with these things. For those of you who don't know what a Ouija board is, it's commonly used in divination and spiritualism, often by friends out to have some fun. Sometimes users become convinced they've been contacted by the spirit world. But is there really a spirit world? Is the Ouija board a portal to the other side? And if talking boards, as they're also called, do allow us to communicate with the spirit world, who exactly are we dealing with in that spirit world? The spirits of our dearly departed, or some trickster demon inhabiting the lower realms of the spirit world? On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we take a special look at the Ouija board, a harmless party game or an invitation to the dark side. I'll speak with several paranormal investigators who believe the Ouija board can be a useful tool for the purposes of communicating with souls of the departed. But, they warn, it's not to be trifled with. And I'll speak with a skeptic who says the planchette, supposedly being guided around the board by some unseen force, is actually responding to the player's unconscious muscle movements. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality.
The Ouija board is a spirit communication tool, and as such it's neutral. It's like dowsing rods, it's like automatic writing, like a pendulum, like a ghost box, any number of devices that human beings have developed to penetrate into the afterlife. So it's intended for spirit communication, although it is marketed as a game or a toy. The Ouija board got its name actually from a session with the Ouija board conducted in the late 19th century. This device was patented and put into commercial production around 1891 to 1892 by a group of toy and novelty entrepreneurs in the Baltimore area. What this company came up with was a board with the letters, the alphabet, the numerals, the words yes, no, and goodbye, with a little moving pointer. Merely could be used to point to letters to spell out answers to questions. And one or more persons could place their hands on this and get answers from the spirits.
Why are they called Ouija boards?
The original founders of the company were sitting around and they asked the board what it wanted to be called, and it spelled out Ouija. And when they asked what that meant, it said good luck. But something interesting that we just found out recently was that a talking board actually made its way to the White House in 1886 as a wedding gift for President Grover Cleveland. And that letter to him and back thanking the person who sent it to them made the newspapers here in the United States. About 4 years later, a company called the Kennard Novelty Company started mass manufacturing and patented the Ouija board. William Fold, whose name is a bit synonymous with the Ouija board, he was one of the original manufacturers, part of the original company, and one of the employees basically took over the company. And from 1890 to 1966, he and his children would make Ouija boards and put them all over the world.
To use the Ouija board, people place their hands on this teardrop-shaped pointer. It has 3 legs on it, and I have seen up to 4 people use the board. I have tried it with up to 4 people, but ideally it works better with 2. You place your fingers lightly on the pointer, very lightly, because you don't want to unconsciously push it around yourself, and ask questions. The idea is that spirits will use your body to push the pointer around to answer the questions.
I've had a lot of experience playing with the Ouija board until I realized it's not a joke. I just stopped using it. I really should have somebody come and help me close the board, because I think that's why I've been plagued with a lot of unusual occurrences. At that time, I didn't realize that when you use the board, you need to close it. You're opening a portal and allowing these spirits to come in, and it's not always good spirits, it's also bad spirits that come in and they try to deceive you. And prior to my use of the Ouija board, we didn't have anything going on at my mom's house. I felt safe in her home. I didn't have any weird sensations. It was comfortable. After my use of the Ouija board, it took on almost a dark sensation. And I tell my parents I feel that that is still following us because a lot of bad things just started happening. My dad ended up having a stroke. He lost his job. You know, their marriage started to fall apart.
The belief that there's something else out there has been around with humankind since the beginning of recorded history.
I have made contact, I believe, with someone using the Ouija board. That was at my mom's house. The spirit gave us the name of Daniel, said that he had committed suicide in the home. And I asked where he was, and he said he was right next to me. I got a real chill from that. He was probably, I would say, about maybe 15, 16 years old. Definitely not see-through. He was like a person just standing there. I thought it was one of my brother's friends, honestly, because he was about the same age as my brother. I was sitting in my room on my bed, facing the door, and he just appeared there, standing there, no expression on his face. There was no emotion. It was almost just a blank stare.
Robert, do you think there's any credence to the claim that talking boards or Ouija boards can be used to communicate with the spirit world?
Is there a spiritual? Yeah, I guess it depends on what you believe. And if there are spirits or something else out there, then why wouldn't they be able to speak through a Ouija or any other talking board? The belief that there's something else out there has been around with humankind since the beginning of recorded history. When people realized someone died and didn't come back, they wanted to make contact with that person. And, you know, again, the talking board or Ouija board is actually about almost 125 years old. Why has it remained so much popular than any of the other things that have come and gone since? Well, talking board is a bit of a game. So people like to play it in group settings and scare each other.
Is there anyone here with us from the spirit world?
I did try to inquire to see if there was a Daniel, in fact, who had committed suicide in the home, but the neighbors didn't want to really get into it. One neighbor, the next door neighbor, she did confirm that a Daniel did live there, but she did not know how he passed. She knew he passed because the paramedics had came and taken him to the hospital, but she didn't know under what circumstances.
I've used them a couple of times in my life. I can tell you that there is a very scientific reason for why they might work. It's called the ideomotor response, and basically it's involuntary movement. When you very gently place your fingers on something, your body is moving it.
Guys, I think there's more than one ghost here.
I have been in many Ouija board sessions, either as a participant or as an observer, in which the pointer is moving very rapidly, spelling out words, so rapidly that the people who have their fingers on the pointers can barely keep up with it. The ideal thing is to place your fingers so lightly on the pointer that you couldn't give it a push. It's not uncommon to see the pointer fly off the board or become very active.
Your body is doing it. They're very, very subtle movements that go through the fingertips onto the planchette, but there are still a lot of people that insist that no, these are spirits moving the planchette.
It's not infallible, and we can't rule out subconscious input in many cases, especially if people get answers that they're really looking for.
We welcome any spirit to communicate with us.
How would you explain then, when there is a group of people all with their hands on the planchette, that the planchette moves around the board giving definitive answers?
What appears to happen when people use a Ouija board, whether there's one person with their fingers on the planchette or more, is that the questions that are being asked are already a bit biased towards the answers that will come. So in other words, if you're there to find out if Aunt Lulu can speak to you from beyond the grave, you're going to ask very specific questions. The ideomotor response in all the participants will tend to, it's almost like the brain seeking out a pattern. They will create the message that will go along with the question.
I've used the Ouija board by myself. I feel there is something to it. The planchette does really move by itself. Whether it's energy that comes from our own bodies, that I'm not sure of. But like I said, once I started using the Ouija board, a lot of unusual occurrences started happening, a lot of strange things just that I couldn't explain, or people who knew me couldn't explain.
He takes the pointer and he tosses it out the window. Figures, it's good riddance now. The next morning, outside of her dorm room was this bag with the board and the pointer in it. We have one case in the book involving some college kids, and the story was related to me by the man. He had a girlfriend who got involved in a group that was using the Ouija board, and it followed a typical pattern of people being amused and entertained, and then the communications got darker and scarier, and they began to get paranoid, so they wanted to get rid of the board.
We need to go.
There's something interesting that we call Ouija-stitions in the talking board world. And these are these urban legends that have arisen to explain interesting phenomena with Ouija boards. People believe that they've thrown it away and the board returns.
So he and his girlfriend put the board and the pointer in a bag one night and drove it out to a lake not far from the college, and he heaved it into the lake, and there was ice on the lake. He said, I could hear it hit the ice and break the ice. We figured it was underwater. On the way home, suddenly the pointer is in the car. It's rolling around on the floor on the passenger side where his girlfriend is. So she was considerably frightened by that. He takes the pointer and he tosses it out the window. Figures, it's good riddance now. The next morning, outside of her dorm room was this bag with the board and the pointer in it.
There have been several incidences of where people have tried to burn it and it still comes back.
But then there's a group of people who will say burning them will cause you to feel like you're burning. Some people say you have to bury it. But if you bury it, then you'll feel like you're suffocating.
The Ouija board was not my board. I was using it with my cousin. Even after we used the Ouija board, though, she even started experiencing things at her house. She's had crystal figurines thrown at her across the room.
In the 1920s and 30s, there were a number of criminal cases involving the use of a Ouija board. Tell me about a few of those.
Often the Ouija board is popular during times of economic depression and times of war. There are a lot of cases, especially in the 1920s, where the Ouija board was used in court cases. One of them is a great case where the headline said, "The Ouija board told me to kill my daddy, so I did." You're probably getting into almost 100 court cases in just that 1920, but then as the 30s and 40s took off, the same thing.
There are many cases documented that in the news media from the past about the Ouija board being used to solve crimes. In one case, it involved a very quick solution to a stolen car. A wealthy couple had their car stolen, and they consulted the Ouija board for the name of who stole it, and the board spelled out a name. They notified the police, and not long after that, the sheriff or chief of police saw their car and a man driving it. So he stopped the car and questioned the man and asked him for his name, and it was the name that matched the message from the Ouija board. Confronted with that information, the man confessed to stealing the car, and he was arrested.
Can you tell me about some of the more interesting chapters in the history of spirit boards?
I think it was 1938 where a woman was using a Ouija board, and it told her that her husband was cheating on her and was hiding money from her. She believed the Ouija board was telling the truth 100%. Now, her husband was like 74 years old and probably not cheating on her, but she believed it, and so she waited until her husband fell asleep, and then she would whack him over the head with a gun, and she would tie him up, and then she would burn him with a hot poker, and she would whip him until he would tell her who he was sleeping with and where the money was. He finally broke, and he made up a story and told her he was sleeping with a neighbor and the money was buried in the backyard. And when she found out those things weren't true, he knew she was going to come at him again, and so he actually shot her and killed her. He actually got off for, just trying to protect himself. Fascinating.
There are a lot of tricky entities out there, and some hostile ones too, who like to take advantage of any opening that they have for spirit communication. Some people are easily obsessed.
Ouija boards have a bad reputation, Robert. They went from a novelty, a fun game, to something demonic, something to be feared. What happened?
I think from the beginning of talking board history, so even going back to 1886, because it was born out of the spiritualist movement, it always had the connotation that it could make contact with something. The difference is, today we view spirit communication as possibly something bad, whereas at the time, you got to think back before the internet, before electricity, before telephones, all of these things that we're used to having, this was seen as entertainment. The whole family would gather around and possibly have mini seances with a talking board, and that was normal and acceptable. It really wasn't until the 1970s where you saw a huge shift. So there were always people who believed it was bad. You had the movie The Exorcist, which is the key moment in a shift in how we view talking boards. And because they show a scene where she admits to using one and making contact with Captain Howdy, that it was seen as this was the portal to possession. It made talking boards more popular because, as we know, kids or teenagers, the minute they see something that's bad, they want to do it. So they all bought Ouija boards because they wanted to see their friends spit up split pea soup and their head spin around.
I would say to anyone who is contemplating using a Ouija board, buying the Ouija board, research it. Know what you're getting into. It's not a game. Definitely, if you're going to use it with caution. Find someone who can close the board for you when you're done.
There can be dangers to using the Ouija board or any spirit communication device. I can't stress enough that the board itself is neutral. It's not bad. It does not automatically invite in bad spirits. But there are people who have bad experiences. If they've been at a party, if people have been drinking, for example, those are not good circumstances for any sort of spirit communication. There are a lot of tricky entities out there, and some hostile ones too, who like to take advantage of any opening that they have for spirit communication. Some people are easily obsessed by spirit communication. They get some results with the Ouija board and they become so fascinated that they use it more and more.
Now for me, I would be a big believer in Ouija boards if I saw the planchette move without anybody touching it. And even then I would have to ask myself if there was a little remote control inside that somebody was operating. But for me, I feel like if a spirit can move a planchette by itself, it requires a lot less energy than having to come and move through the human being who's got their fingers on the planchette and making it move that way.
There's a great quote from Mad Magazine. If there really is an afterlife, I'll bet the best way to contact it is through a plastic mass-produced board game from Milton Bradley. Whether you believe in the afterlife or not, why mess around with the Ouija board to find out? We'll all find out in the end anyway. My advice is, don't mess around with something that can open doors that you can't close. But if you do, perhaps you should follow these 5 basic Ouija board rules. Rule number 1, never play with the Ouija board alone. Number 2, don't allow a countdown through the numbers or backwards through the alphabet. Number 3, always place a silver object under the Ouija board before playing. Number 4, never ever mention God, as it's believed that entities contacted through the Ouija board are generally evil in nature. Some may appear good at first, but it's likely a demon who's playing tricks. Number 5, when you are done playing, always say goodbye. However, rules are meant to be broken on both sides of the Great Divide. Now, I'd like to know what you think. You can get in touch with me here at The Conspiracy Show through the website, theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.